The Magic School Bus, Chapter Book. Space Explorers. Written by Eva Moore. Illustrations by Ted Enoch. Introduction. Hi, my name is Carlos. I am one of the kids in Ms. Frizzle's class. Maybe you've heard of Ms. Frizzle. Sometimes we just call her the Frizz. She is a terrific teacher, but a little strange. One of her favorite subjects is science, and she knows everything about it. She takes us on lots of field trips in the magic school business. Believe me, it's not called magic for nothing. We never know what's going to happen when we get on that bus. Miss Frizzle likes to surprise us, but we can usually tell when she is planning a special lesson. We just look at what she's wearing. A few months ago, Miss Frizzle showed up in an astronaut jumpsuit. We had just started a unit on the solar system, so we thought Miss Frizzle was dressed up to get us in the mood. Of course, we couldn't actually take a field trip to outer space. Ha ha. But the joke was on us. Let me tell you what happened. Chapter 1. I stuffed my homework in my backpack and ran out the door. I was in a hurry to get to school. Today was Solar System Day. Our homework was to write a report on one of the 8 planets. My report was on Mars, my favorite. I just knew my report would be the best. But that wasn't the only reason I was in a hurry. I had finally finished putting together Rocco the Rockhound robot, a remote control rover I made from a kit. I'd been working on him for weeks. There must have been a zillion parts. Now Rocco was ready to roll, and I was taking him to school for show and tell. When I got to class, Miss Frizzle was hanging up a chart of the solar system. Our solar system. The solar system is the sun and all the bodies that orbit around it, the 8 planets, their moons, asteroids, chunks of rock, and comets, balls of ice and dust. The sun is the center of our solar system. The sun supplies all the light and almost all the heat for everything else in the solar system. No planet, moon, comet, or asteroid has any light of its own. One by one the rest of the class came in. They crowded around to look at Rocco. Cool toy, Carlos, said Dorothy, and most of the time we call her DA. Rocco was modeled after Sojourner, the first robot rover to explore Mars. But Rocco looked more like a dog than a robot. As he rolled along on his wheels, his head turned from side to side and his tail wagged. He even made a little beeping noise as he moved. It sounded something like yip, yip, yip. But the best thing about Rocco was his rock pocket, a secret compartment in his back. When I pushed a button on the remote, the rock pocket opened and out popped a built-in mechanical arm with a scoop at the end. The scoop could be dragged along the ground to pick up rocks and soil. Another button on the remote turned the arm and dumped the stuff into the rock pocket. It was the neatest way to find rocks for my collection. Rocco isn't a toy, I said. He's a robot rock collector. I pushed the button to open Rocco's rock pocket. Inside were some rocks and reddish clay soil that Rocco had scooped up on the way to school. This soil looks a lot like the soil on Mars, I said. Ralphie laughed. No way, he said. Mars's soil is green, just like Martians. You've got rocks in your head, Ralphie, I said. That stuff about little green men on Mars is pure science fiction. Mars is actually called the Red Planet because of the rust in its soil. Well, I heard that there may have been life on Mars long ago, Phoebe said. Maybe they had little green men then. You guys don't know anything, Keisha said. Nothing could live on Mars, it's too cold. Ms. Frizzle put an end to the argument. I think the best way to settle this is with our own eyes. Everyone, to the bus. Mars is only 49 million miles away. We can be there before lunch. I tucked Rocco under my arm and followed the Frizz to the parking lot. The bus looked a little different than usual. For one thing, there were a couple of huge rockets sticking out the back. If I'd known we were going to outer space today, I would have brought a bigger lunch, Arnold said as we climbed aboard. Buckle your seat belts, the Frizz called. A regular spaceship would take at least 9 months to get to Mars. But this is the magic school business. We'll be there in a jiffy. She fired the rockets and we blasted off. All planets travel around the sun by Armid. Each planet travels around the sun or revolves in its own path, or orbit. The farther the planet is from the sun, the longer it takes to revolve. Earth is the third planet from the sun. It takes 365 days, 1 year, to make one revolution. Spring plus summer plus fall plus winter equals 1 year. All planets spin by Phoebe. The planets spin LTE tops as they revolve around the sun. Some planets spin very fast, some spin very slowly. Earth spins a runo, or rotates, once every 24 hours. This is what makes day and night. One rotation equals 1 daytime and 1 nighttime. Chapter 2. The great power of the rockets gave the bus enough speed to break away from Earth's gravity. We zoomed through the atmosphere into dark, airless space. Earth's Protector by Keisha. The atmosphere is the thin layer of air that surrounds and protects Earth. The atmosphere is held down by Earth's gravity. Without gravity, the air we breathe will fly off into space. A word from Dorothy in gravity is the force within a star or planet that pulls objects toward its center. Once we were going fast enough, the Frizz turned off the rockets. Right away, strange things started to happen. I had been holding Rocco on my lap. But I let go of him for a second and he floated up to the ceiling. At the same time, Ralphie yelled, "Hey, I can fly!" He had unbuckled his seatbelt and was floating above us like Peter Pan. That's because we're weightless while we stay in orbit around Earth, Ms. Frizzle explained. With the engines off, we're no longer being pulled toward the floor of the bus by gravity, so our bodies can float around. I've got to try it, Keisha said. She unbuckled her seatbelt and moved too quickly, spinning around in a somersault. Soon we were all bumping into one another as we tumbled around inside the space bus. We had to hold onto seat backs to steady ourselves. Arnold was floating upside down near a window. "Look at Earth," he said. "It's so beautiful from up here." We all floated over to see. Earth was a blue and brownish-green sphere surrounded by swirling white clouds. Home sweet home. Earth, the perfect planet by Arnold. Earth is the perfect distance from the sun for life. It's not too hot and not too cold. It has water and gases, such as oxygen, that living things need. It also has an atmosphere to protect it from harmful rays from the sun. All of this makes Earth a perfect place for animals and plants to live and grow. Earth is one of the 4 rocky planets, along with Mercury, Venus, and Mars, the Frizz said. But as you can see, most of the surface is covered with water. Some people think a better name for our planet would be ocean. There was a lot of water covering Earth. I couldn't believe how small the planet looked from space. "Hey, there's the moon!" Wanda called. "Or at least half of it." "The whole moon is there, Wanda," said Ms. Frizzle. "But we only see the part that is lit up by the sun's light. The orb that orbits by Wanda. The moon orbits Earth, just as Earth orbits the sun. One orbit takes 29.5 days. The moon seems to change shape because we see different amounts of its sunite side as it travels around Earth. I remembered that the moon is covered with rocks. "Ms. Frizzle," I said, "could we stop here? I always wanted some moon rocks for my collection." "Sure thing, Carlos." Ms. Frizzle fired some engines to change our direction. We slowed down as we came near the bright side of the moon. It was covered with deep pits and craters that looked like huge bowls. We landed in one of the wide craters with a thud. Put on your space helmets, everyone. Ms. Frizzle instructed us, showing us how to strap on our breathing equipment. You won't be able to breathe without the oxygen tanks. There's not a breath of air out there. Since sound can't travel without air, we all had radios in our helmets so we could talk with one another. I stepped carefully off the bus onto the dusty ground. Wow, I could hardly believe it. I feel like Neil Armstrong, I said. One small step for Carlos. Moonwalk by Carlos. On July 20th, 1969, American astronaut Neil Armstrong became the first person to set foot on the moon. He was one of 3 men in the Apollo LL crew. Millions and millions of people around the world watched on TV. Armstrong said, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Between 1969 and 1972, 12 U.S. astronauts walked on the moon. They brought back 855 pounds of rocks and soil for scientists to study. Watch your step, the Frizz told us. The moon has gravity, but it's much weaker than on Earth. You're going to be much lighter on your feet here than you are at home? From the desk of Ms. Frizzle's Guide to Gravity. The pull of gravity depends on the mass of the planet, moon, or other body in space. Usually, the larger the body, the more mass it has. The moon is much smaller than Earth, so it has much less gravity. If you weigh 75 pounds on Earth, you would weigh only 12 pounds on the moon. We, called Ralphie. This is better than a trampoline. He jumped easily off the ground, came back down, then bounced up. Soon we were all leaping and laughing. Da and Keisha started a game of leapfrog. I can leap like a real frog, Keisha said. I can jump like a cat, Da said. Come to think of it, I now weigh about the same as my cat does on Earth. We were having so much fun, I almost forgot the reason we had come here in the first place. Rocks, I said. It's time to put Rocco to work. I bent over and set Rocco down, but I didn't see Tim jumping behind me. He came down and knocked me over. And Rocco flew out of my hands. As I fell, I landed on Rocco's remote control and accidentally hit the on button. Oh, no! Rocco's rockets fired up and he blasted off into space. Rocco! I cried. I reached up to grab him, but he zoomed away. I could see his tail wagging as he went. Poor Rocco. He shot off into the darkness. He could be lost in space forever. What would I do without him? Chapter 3. Hurry! I yelled. We've got to rescue Rocco. Rocco was speeding farther and farther into space. If we didn't get going fast, we'd never be able to catch up with him. As soon as everyone was aboard the space bus, Ms. Frizzle fired the rockets and we took off after my little robot. Once we were out of orbit, we were no longer weightless. We could walk around on the bus again. I'm sorry I bumped into you on the moon, Carlos, Tim said. I hope we can get Rocco back. It's okay, I said. It was an accident. Keep an eye out, kids. We might see an asteroid or two, Ms. Frizzle said. They're chunks of rock. From D.A.S notebook, space rocks asteroids can be tiny or hundreds of miles wide. Ceres, the largest asteroid in our solar system, is about 600 miles across. Most asteroids stay in orbit between Mars and Jupiter in what we call the asteroid belt. Some asteroids crash together and bounce off to roam around in other parts of the solar system. Hey, Ms. Frizzle, what's that bright star ahead? Phoebe asked. It's not a star, Phoebe, the Frizz told her. That's the planet Venus. Venus is the third brightest object we can see from Earth after the Sun and the Moon. From DA's notebook, a planet is not a star. A star is a hot, glowing ball of gas that gives off heat and light. A planet is a body that revolves around a star. It gives off no light of its own. The light we see is reflected sunlight. DA had done her report on Venus. She told us that Venus is so bright because the layers of thick clouds surrounding it reflect a lot of light from the sun. Soon we could see the swirling clouds of Venus, and it looked as if Rocco was heading straight into them. Rocco will be a goner if he hits those clouds, DA said. They're made of sulfuric acid that would burn right through his metal skin. Venus, killer planet by DA. Venus is about the same size as Earth and is closer to us than any other planet. Venus is deadly hot all the time, and its surface is nothing but rocky plains and dead volcanoes. No person has ever been on Venus. The carbon dioxide in its atmosphere is poisonous to Earthlings. But a few space probes have landed on its hot, windy surface. A space probe is an unmanned research craft. In 1982, a Russian space probe called Venera 13 landed on Venus and sent back the first color photos of the planet's surface. The space probe lasted for only 2 hours before the heat destroyed its instruments and radio transmitters. Suddenly, I remembered Rocco's remote control. It was in my pocket. Maybe I could use it to steer him away from those deadly clouds. I had to act fast before the planet's gravity pulled him in. I pushed the reverse button. Right on. Rocco spun around and headed back toward the space bus. You did it, Carlos. Tim yelled. Now we just have to figure out how to get him inside once he gets close enough. But before we could even think about that, something terrible happened. A small asteroid came hurtling along. It hit Rocco and sent him spinning off again. Follow that robot, please. I called to Ms. Frizzle. The space bus zoomed off, leaving Venus in our dust. Rocco was going so fast, soon he was just a dot in space. Carlos, can you use Rocco's radio signal to follow him? Ralphie asked. We can try, I said. I pushed the voice button. We heard a faint sound. Yip, yip, yip. I've located Rocco on the radar screen, Ms. Frizzle said. She set a new course and fired the control thrusters. We caught up with Rocco as he